Hello, this is Kabo, and I want to talk about a mod that I wrote. This mod I'm calling the HostileSpawnOverlay Mod. The name is pretty self-explanatory. As you can see, it simply draws an overlay wherever there's a possibility for mobs to spawn. Basically just does a bunch of checks: light level check, bounding box check, checks for water, checks for slime chunks, any kind of check to see if it's possible for a mob to spawn in an area. And if it is possible for any type of mob to spawn, then it will highlight that block with a red square, as you can see. So pretty simple idea. Of course, it's used for things like lighting up caves or visualizing the area of mob traps, whatever you need to use it for, just to make it a little easier on you. So simple idea, simple way of seeing how things work. Before I go into details of what you can actually do with it and what settings you have, I want to thank Vino97 for suggesting the idea to me. I wrote it based on his suggestion. And I want to thank Apoc, who wrote a similar mod called the Light Level Overlay Mod, which shows the light level in the block as a number overlay. A pretty cool mod, which I used as a reference for learning the OpenGL, and also used as a reference for doing the positioning and everything. So pretty cool mod by Apoc. Check that out. I'll give you a link in the description. Anyway, let's talk about how this mod works. So first of all, we can toggle it on and off. We do this by holding F4 and pressing H. As you can see, when it's off, we no longer render. It's not doing any computation, so you can save CPU cycles if you don't want it on. And when we press it again, you can see it will turn on. Oops. It also shows us some indicators of status there. It's only up for a few seconds, so I'll have to turn it on and off again. We've got see-through, which is off, slimes, which are on, BB, which is on. That's bounding box. We've also got the mode, which is currently cube, and the range, which is currently 32. So lots of settings to play around with, lots of things to talk about. I'm going to start by talking about the range because it's probably the easiest to explain. The range, as you can see, simply that outer edge there. As you can see, it moves along with the player. That's the range that we're doing checks. We're not checking outside of this range. We don't want to check too far because this can get computationally intensive if you have too many blocks to check. So we limit it to a certain range, which we can adjust by holding F4 and pressing plus, or holding F4 and pressing minus to increase or decrease it. We can increase it as far up as 64, or we can decrease it as far down as 10. So quite a range to work with. It's, as you can see, all directions: vertical, horizontal, 32 in that way, 32 that way, that way, that way, and that way. That's for this mode, cubic. I'll get into the modes later once we have more information about how the mod works. So that's what it's checking at the moment. Now, how it's actually doing the checks, as you can see, there's some areas here that are not having the overlay. These are the ones that are lit up. Since light level is the only thing that matters here, slimes can't spawn here. The light level is preventing all the spawns. Similarly, you've got bounding box check going on down here, preventing spawns down there, even though it's dark enough. Light level over here, water preventing spawns here, all kinds of checks going on. For the light level, of course, it's pretty straightforward. Most mobs cannot spawn if the light level is greater than 7. So in all of these areas where the light level is higher than 7, around this torch, around the end portal, or the nether portal, mobs can basically not spawn. When it's dark, they can. The bounding box, also pretty easy to understand. We've got bounding box preventing, or the bounding box of the spiders are blocked by the blocks on the wall here, and the bounding box of the 2 block tall mobs are blocked by this half slab here, so nothing can spawn there because slimes also cannot spawn here. If we wanted to block spawning in this space, since we don't have to worry about spiders since they're already blocked, we just block the tall mobs. You can see it stops them. Similarly, if we want to block, say, spiders here, since tall mobs are already blocked, we can put a block there to stop spiders. Pretty easy idea to understand the bounding box as well. It's also checking slimes. It checks slimes in swamps, and it checks slimes in slime chunks. In swamps, of course, slimes are affected by the light level. So if I put a light down here, you can see it is stopping slimes from spawning. You'll notice that this particular block, even though we are blocking the tall mobs from spawning and spiders from spawning with this, you'll notice that slimes can still spawn there. That's because they can fit in this one block area because their smallest size is only 0.6 meters. It's a 0.6 meter cube. There is one thing to note about this though. If rather than a slab above this air block you have an opaque cube, like a stone block, it does prevent spawning here. This is one of the game rules on how spawning works. If you have a opaque cube above the block where you're trying to spawn, it will not spawn. Just something to keep in mind. We can also go to a slime chunk to see more slime chunk and how slime chunks work. If we come down here, you can see even though this room is very well lit up, we still have spawning. That's because slimes are still able to spawn here, and you can see if we try to block off bounding boxes here, since slimes are still spawning there, they can still spawn. Now, you can configure what you're looking for in these checks by playing around with the bounding box and slime check options. The bounding box option is controlled by F4B. When I press this, you can see bounding box off, bounding box on. It toggles whenever you press F4B. And for slimes, you can toggle this by doing F4C. So when I switch that off, you can see it's no longer checking slimes here. Basically it says we're ignoring slimes, so we're saying that nothing can spawn here because we already lit up the area. Of course, this also applies to the swamp. If we have a swamp over here and we're doing the bounding box check, let's turn the bounding box check back on. But now we want to ignore slimes, since slimes are the only thing that will spawn in here. When we ignore them, you can see we're saying slimes won't spawn there, nothing else can spawn there, so that block is not spawnable. Of course, that's not actually the case, we're just ignoring it for the check. As far as the bounding box check goes, if you ignore the bounding box check, you're basically only doing the light level check. So you see this area is dark enough for mobs to spawn, but no mob could actually spawn there. If we ignore the bounding box check, you can see it does indicate that mobs can spawn there even though they can't. Interesting thing here, you see also the fence post, because it's not actually a opaque cube. It allows that. But anyway, those are all the conditions. You can play around with it to sort of tailor the check to how you want to see what you're looking for if you're doing something specific, or if you want to reduce the computational intensity, turn off the bounding box and slime checks if you're only looking for the light level checks, whatever you want to do. You can configure it that way. Now there are a few other settings, as you saw. We've got the see-through setting and the mode setting. I'll talk about the mode setting after the see-through setting, so let's go ahead and talk about see-through first. Now before I get into this, I want to first give a warning to anybody who wants to use this in multiplayer. This could sort of be considered cheating, so if you play on a server where this is not accepted, you do so at your own risk. This basically renders the overlay through everything, or rather on top of everything. It ignores the render depth. So as you can see when I turn it on, you get all the caves and stuff where mobs can spawn being rendered on top of this top layer. So it's actually ignoring the render depth here, so it does some weird things, like you might see parts of this being hidden if you have the overlay, this top level overlay over it, or you might see mobs disappearing because of the way it blends all the color and alpha channels. It's just something to keep in mind. So another thing to use at your own risk if you use this overlay thing, or this see-through thing. But what it does do is it allows you to easily find caves. So as you can see, we've got a cave down here. Let's find another one just for example's sake. Over here you can see a cave directly below us. If we dig straight down, it opens up that cave. and we can go in and fill it up if we want. Now, I'll point out to you that even though it's dark in here, all of this overlay is still pretty bright. This is intentional. I did this so that if it gets dark, as you can see, it gets pretty dark in here, you can still see this overlay. You don't have to worry about not being able to find it or anything if it's too dark. You can even change your brightness all the way down to moody, and it will still show this overlay even when it's pitch black. So pretty useful if you are, trying to find the caves. You don't have to worry about ever losing this overlay because it's always going to be plenty bright enough. So pretty cool use there. Now, there's one more thing to talk about as far as how did I get down here? As far as the rendering options go, or the check options go, and that is the mode. Now you can change mode by pressing F4M. When you do this, you can see the mode has switched to narrow. You can switch it back to cube by pressing F4M again. In cube mode, what we're doing is we're checking in a cube. 32 that way, 32 that way, 32 that way, 32 that way, and 32 down. So actually, it's actually a half cube. It doesn't check 32 above, just because that would be wasting time since we're not rendering anything above. So half a cube is being checked in cube mode. In narrow mode, what it does is it halves the horizontal distance but doubles the vertical distance. So it's extremely useful for see-through. When you have see-through, you can see in cube mode, you can see a little bit further out, but in narrow mode, you can see a little bit further down. So if you're looking for caves deep underground, narrow mode might actually be better for you. Narrow mode is actually less computationally expensive at the same range settings, so you might find that useful as well. Other than that, you can also switch colors. I give you the option of switching to blue if you don't like red, or if red hurts your eyes or something, you can switch to blue. If you're looking at red wool or something like that, you might want to switch to blue to make it easier to see. That's one option. It also does work in the nether and in the end. The checks are a little different. Everything's hard-coded, so the checks are different. First thing you'll notice in the nether is it's blue by default. You can of course switch it to red if you want, but it's blue by default because netherrack is red, the fog is red, everything's very red in the nether, so blue might be a little easier to see. The only thing to note about the nether is because magma cubes can spawn anywhere and magma cubes can be small, you'll see that the only way to sort of ignore them is to just turn off slime checks. You'll also notice that light level doesn't affect any of the spawns in here. That's because light level does not actually affect any of the nether spawns. So another thing to keep in mind. You can also check the end. When we're in the end, let me turn off this see-through again. I don't know if I mentioned, but see-through can be toggled by F4Y, by the way. You can see in the end, because Endermen are affected by light level, putting down a torch will change the things that get shown. They get also affected by bounding box, so if I block off anywhere up to 3 blocks, you can see it interferes with the bounding box of the Enderman. Pretty straightforward. Really, that's all there is to it as far as the end and the nether go. And that's really pretty much all there is to this mod. Now it is working in SMP without the need of a server-side mod. The only thing to keep in mind is the seed is not taken from the server, so you have to input it on your own to actually see slime chunks. So I'll go to a server that uses the exact same seed as the single player world I was just in. As you can see, it looks very familiar. But if I go down to the slime chunk down here, you can see it is not highlighted. And I do have, I don't have slime spawning on, but when I turn slime spawning on, you can see it's not highlighted, even though you would expect it to be. Now, if I go to single player, and you have to do this in single player just because the command isn't recognized by multiplayer, I have a command for you to use. It's HSO set seed. And you basically just type in the seed of whatever the level is in multiplayer that you're going to join, and it will apply that seed to any multiplayer game that you join. So as long as the seed is correct, you'll see slime chunks in the correct location. If it's incorrect, you'll see slime chunks in the wrong location, so just keep that in mind as well. In this case, the seed is simply 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I can do, oops, HSO set seed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now you won't get any confirmation that it worked, but you also won't see that it failed. So as long as you don't see that it failed, it should be fine. Let me go to the server again, and once I'm there, you can see it's now displaying the slime chunk in exactly the right location. So I think that's all there is to this mod. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you find it useful. And please let me know any feedback and any suggestions. You'll find the latest download on the Minecraft forums in the link provided in the description. There will be a Forge version as well. That's still in progress, but look forward to that. And anything else, please let me know on the Minecraft forum. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you enjoy the mod. And see you next time. Bye.